The letter was discovered in a tin box beneath the floorboards of an old cabin in the Rocky Mountains. The year was 1962. The woman who found it was 73 years old, the granddaughter of its author. The paper had yellowed with age, the ink faded to the color of dried blood, but the words remained legible. Devastating. They told a story that should not have existed, a story of a killer who became a savior, of a virgin bride who chose the most dangerous man in Montana territory, of love born from violence and redemption earned through sacrifice. This is that story. But we do not begin at the beginning. We begin at the moment everything nearly ended. A cabin burned against the night sky, flames reaching toward the stars like the fingers of hell itself. On the ridge above, a man stood alone, blood running down his left arm, a Winchester rifle in his right hand. His face showed nothing. His eyes showed everything. Below him, 4 riders disappeared into the darkness. One of them carried something across the saddle. Someone. A woman with brown hair and a spirit that refused to break even now. Clara. The man on the ridge watched them vanish into the tree line. His breath came slow and steady despite the wound, despite the fire, despite the fact that everything he had tried to protect had just been ripped away. For 24 years, Boone Thatcher had lived as a ghost, hiding in the mountains, running from a past written in blood, believing he deserved nothing but solitude and slow death. Then she appeared, and everything changed. Now they had taken her. The men who worked for the colonel, the men who would do anything to break Harrison Sinclair's campaign for Senate, the men who did not understand what they had just awakened. Boone raised his eyes to the darkness where the riders had vanished. "I will find you," he thought. "And when I do, every man who touched her will learn why they called me the ghost." He turned and walked into the forest, disappearing into shadow as naturally as breathing. This is how it ended. But to understand why a 52-year-old mountain man was willing to burn the entire world for a woman he had known only 2 weeks, we need to go back. 3 weeks earlier, a night of snow and blood and choices that could never be undone. The storm came down from the peaks without warning, the way Montana storms always did. One moment the sky held nothing but stars. The next, the world turned white with fury. Boone Thatcher had lived in these mountains for 2 decades. He knew their moods like a man knows the face of a woman he once loved. He had been hunting elk 3 days north of his cabin when the weather shifted, and now he rode through the blizzard with the patience of someone who had survived worse. 52 years had carved deep lines into his weathered face. His beard was thick and gray, streaked his hair long beneath a battered hat. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, and they held the kind of stillness that came only from seeing too much death. He did not hurry. Hurrying killed men in weather like this. He simply moved steady and certain, trusting his horse to find the path home. That was when he heard it, not a scream. Screams would have been lost in the wind. This was something else, a sound beneath the storm. Breathing, the desperate broken breathing of someone who had nearly stopped. Boone reined his horse to a halt, listened. The wind howled, the snow bit at his face. And beneath it all that sound continued, faint, fading, human. He turned toward it without thinking the way a man turns toward a fire in winter. Not because he chose to, but because something deeper than choice demanded it. The first thing he saw was the body. A man lay face down in the snow, blood spreading beneath him in a dark stain that the white was slowly erasing. Dead, maybe 10 minutes, shot through the chest at close range. Boone did not stop for the dead. His eyes followed the trail beyond. Boot prints, drag marks, more blood. 20 yards further he found her. She was still alive when the rope cut into her wrists. Not alive in the way people usually mean it. Not screaming, not fighting. Just breathing in short, broken gasps while the snow buried her inch by inch. Clara Sinclair was 24 years old, though she did not look it now. Her traveling dress had been torn, leaving her shoulders bare to the cold. Her feet were naked, the skin already turning the wrong color. Her lips had gone purple. Her eyes, when they opened, held the wild terror of a creature that had been hunted too long. Behind her, a second man lay in the snow, this one still twitching. The knife in his back suggested someone had fought. The blood on her fingers suggested who. Boone dismounted in one fluid motion. He moved toward her carefully, the way you approach a wounded animal that might bolt or bite. She saw him. Her eyes went wider, if that was possible. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out except that terrible breathing. "Easy," he said. His voice was rough from disuse, the voice of a man who had not spoken to another soul in months. "I am not going to hurt you." Her eyes did not believe him. Nothing in them believed anything anymore. He crouched beside her, keeping his hands visible. The rope around her wrists was thick hemp, tied cruelly tight. He drew his knife, saw her flinch, and waited. "I need to cut this," he said. "Can you understand me?" Something flickered in her gaze. Not trust, just recognition that he was speaking words instead of attacking. She gave the smallest nod. Boone cut the rope. The blood that followed told him how long she had been bound. Too long, much too long. He shrugged off his buffalo coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. She was shaking so badly that she could not hold it closed, so he did it for her, his big hands gentle despite their calluses. "Can you stand?" No answer. Just that breathing. Just those eyes. Boone made a decision. He slid his arms beneath her, lifting her from the snow as easily as he would lift a wounded fawn. She weighed nothing, or maybe everything. He could not tell any more. Her lips moved as he carried her toward his horse, a whisper so faint that the wind should have stolen it. But he heard. "Please." Her voice cracked on the word. "Do not take me back." Back where? To whom she did not answer. Her eyes had closed. Her body had gone limp against his chest. Boone looked down at her face. Young. Too young for whatever had put those shadows under her eyes. Too young for the scars he could already see forming beneath the skin. He thought about the dead men behind him. Thought about the drag marks. Thought about what kind of people tied a woman's wrists raw and left her to freeze. Then he lifted her onto his horse, climbed up behind her, and turned toward his cabin. Whatever she was running from it would have to find her through him first. The cabin was small. One room, one bed, one stove. A place built for survival, not comfort. Boone had lived here alone for 20 years, and the space showed it. Sparse, clean. The refuge of a man who owned nothing he was not willing to leave behind. He laid her on the bed, the only bed, and built the fire up until the room glowed orange with heat. Then he set water to boiling and gathered what supplies he had. Bandages. Whiskey for cleaning wounds. More blankets than one man ever needed, but that he kept anyway for reasons he chose not to examine. She did not wake as he worked. Her breathing steadied, but did not strengthen. Her skin remained the color of ash. Boone cleaned the wounds on her wrists first. The rope had cut nearly to bone in places. She would carry these scars for life. He wrapped them carefully, the way he had once wrapped the wounds of soldiers in a war he had spent 20 years trying to forget. Her feet were worse. Frostbite had already begun its work. He placed them in warm water, not hot, and watched the color slowly return. Pink first, then red. When she whimpered in her unconscious state, he counted it as progress. Pain meant feeling. Feeling meant alive. He worked through the night, changing water, adjusting blankets, feeding the fire, never sleeping, never looking away for long. Somewhere around midnight she began to talk in her sleep. "Please." The word came out choked raw. "I did not tell anyone. I promise. I did not tell." Boone did not respond. He just listened, filing away the fragments for later. The papers. She shifted restlessly, her hands clutching at nothing. "He will kill me for the papers." What papers? Who would kill her? Why? The questions piled up, but Boone did not ask them, not yet. There would be time for questions when she could answer. Right now she needed to survive. He pulled the chair closer to the bed and sat down with his rifle across his knees. Outside the storm raged. Inside the fire crackled. and Boone Thatcher, the man they had once called the Ghost of Shenandoah, kept watch over a stranger whose name he did not yet know. Dawn came gray and reluctant through the cabin's single window. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world buried in white, silent, clean, the kind of silence that made a man feel like the last person alive. Boone had not slept. He sat in the same chair, in the same position, watching her breathe. His eyes were bloodshot, his body stiff, but he did not move to rest. Not yet. She woke slowly, the way people wake from nightmares. First a twitch, then a faster breath, then her eyes opening all at once, wild and searching. She saw the ceiling, the walls, the unfamiliar room. Then she saw him. The reaction was immediate. She scrambled backward on the bed until her back hit the wall, her hands raised as if to ward off a blow. Her breathing went ragged again. Her eyes showed the whites all around like a horse about to bolt. Boone did not move. He stayed exactly where he was, his hands visible on his lap, his voice low and steady. "You are safe. I am not going to touch you." The words seemed to reach her from a great distance. She blinked, swallowed. Her hands slowly lowered, though they did not stop shaking. "Where?" Her voice was a ruin scraped raw by cold and screaming and silence. "Where am I? My cabin." 30 miles north of Helena in the mountains. "I found you on the road last night. Do you remember?" She stared at him. Her mind was clearly working, sorting through fragments of memory, trying to piece together how she had come to be in a stranger's bed wearing nothing but a torn dress and bandages. The men, she finally said. There were men. They are dead. Boone said it simply, without emotion. "You killed one with a knife. I shot the other. One." She looked at her hands, saw the scratches, the dried blood under her nails. "I stabbed him." "Yes." Something shifted in her expression. Not pride exactly, not relief. Just a kind of grim acknowledgement that she had done what needed to be done to survive. She was stronger than she looked. Boone filed that away too. "My name is Boone Thatcher," he said. "I live here alone. No one knows you are here. No one is coming through that door unless I let them." Her eyes searched his face for several long moments, looking for deception, looking for threat, finding apparently neither. "Clara," she said at last. "Clara Sinclair." Sinclair. Boone kept his expression neutral, though the name landed like a stone in still water. Harrison Sinclair. The man running for Senate. "My father." "Yes." The silence stretched between them. Boone thought about what that meant. The daughter of the most powerful political figure in Montana Territory, beaten and dragged through the snow by men who clearly wanted her dead, or worse. This was not random violence. This was something else entirely. "There is coffee," he said, standing slowly and moving toward the stove. "Soup. You need to eat." He poured both without waiting for her answer and set them on the small table beside the bed. Then he moved to the door, putting distance between them. "I will be outside, checking the perimeter." He paused with his hand on the latch. "The door has no lock, but I am not going to enter without warning. You are safe here, Miss Sinclair. As safe as I can make you." "Why?" Her voice stopped him. "Why are you helping me? You do not know me." Boone considered the question, considered all the answers he could give, settled on the simplest truth. "Because you needed help, and because I was there." He stepped outside before she could respond, closing the door softly behind him. The morning air bit at his lungs, clean and sharp after the stuffiness of the cabin. Boone stood on the small porch and looked out at the white expanse of his mountain. His sanctuary, the place where he had hidden from the world for 2 decades. Now the world had found him, in the form of a young woman with haunted eyes and a father who commanded attention from Washington to San Francisco. He should take her down the mountain, deliver her to her father, walk away and forget this ever happened. But even as he thought it, he knew he would not. Not because of her, not because of duty or compassion or any noble impulse, because of the men who had died trying to hurt her, because someone had sent them, because that someone was still out there waiting and would send more when these did not return. Boone Thatcher had spent 20 years running from violence, but violence had a way of finding a man whether he ran or not. Maybe it was time to stop running. She slept most of that first day. Boone checked on her periodically, always knocking, always announcing himself before entering. Each time she was either asleep or pretending to be, and he did not push. He spent the daylight hours erasing traces of his passage from the night before. The storm had done most of the work, but he was thorough by nature. If anyone came looking, they would find only snow. The bodies he left where they lay. The mountains would deal with them in their own time. Wolves, weather, the slow patience of decay. By spring there would be nothing left but bones, and bones told no stories that anyone would believe. When darkness fell again, Boone returned to find Clara awake and sitting up in bed. The color had returned to her face, though shadows still lurked beneath her eyes. She was holding the coffee cup he had left that morning, both hands wrapped around it, as if drawing warmth from its memory. "You need to eat," he said from the doorway. "I know." Her voice was stronger now, though still rough. She shook her head. "My stomach." Boone nodded. He understood. Sometimes the body rejected food when the mind was too full of horror. He had experienced it himself long ago in a different life. "When you are ready," he said. "There is no rush." He moved to his chair by the fire, leaving the bed and the distance it provided entirely to her. She watched him settle her eyes, tracking his movements with the wary attention of someone who had learned too young that men could not be trusted. "You said your name was Thatcher," she said after a while. "Yes. The man who found me. The man who killed the one I did not." She paused. "Who are you? Just a man who lives on this mountain?" "No." She shook her head slightly. "I saw how you moved, heard how you speak. You were a soldier once." Boone said nothing. His silence was answer enough. Which side? The question hung in the air between them. In Montana Territory, it still mattered. 24 years after Appomattox, it still mattered more than it should. "Confederate," he said at last. "A long time ago." She absorbed this. Her expression did not change. "My father fought for the Union," she said. "My brother died for it. At Shenandoah." Something cold moved through Boone's chest. Shenandoah. Of course. Of all the battles, all the places, all the dead, it had to be that one. "I am sorry for your loss," he said. And he meant it, though the words felt inadequate. Shenandoah was a name that haunted his dreams even now. It was a long time ago. Clara looked away toward the window and the darkness beyond. "I never knew him. I was born the year he died. But my family never forgot, never stopped grieving." Boone understood that too. Some wounds never healed. They just scarred over hard and thick, a permanent reminder of what had been lost. "Why were those men after you?" The question came out before he could stop it. The topic needed to change, for both their sakes. Clara's hands tightened on the coffee cup. For a moment he thought she would not answer. Then she spoke. "I came to Montana 3 weeks ago to help my father's campaign. He is running for one of the Senate seats, the first elections since the territory became a state." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "I found something I should not have found. Evidence that his opponent, Colonel Victor Ashford, has been bribing officials throughout the territory. Sheriffs, judges, even some of my father's own staff. You have proof I had it. A list of names and payments, written in Ashford's own hand." Her jaw tightened. "Someone told him I took it, and he sent men to bring me back, or to make sure I could never talk." "The papers you mentioned in your sleep," Boone said. "That is what this is about." "Yes." She looked at him directly now, her eyes clear and hard, despite the exhaustion behind them. "Ashford will do anything to keep this quiet. He has already killed at least 3 men who opposed him, made it look like accidents. He owns the law in half this territory. No one can touch him. But you took his evidence anyway. Someone had to." Her chin lifted slightly. Someone had to try to stop him. Boone studied her for a long moment. This young woman, daughter of wealth and privilege, who had risked everything to expose corruption, who had stabbed a man to escape and walked barefoot through a blizzard rather than surrender, stronger than she looked, much stronger. "Where are the papers now?" he asked. Hidden. Before they caught me." She touched her chest briefly, then dropped her hand. "I have a copy. On me. Sewn into my dress. The original is somewhere safe where they cannot find it." Boone nodded slowly. He was beginning to understand the shape of this situation. A powerful man with enemies, a young woman with evidence that could destroy him, and a mountain full of snow between them and anything resembling safety. "Ashford will send more men," he said. "When these do not return?" "I know. And he will not stop until he finds you." "I know that too." Clara met his gaze steadily. "That is why I asked you not to take me back. If I go to my father now, Ashford will know exactly where to find me. He will attack the ranch. People will die. My father will die." She shook her head. "I cannot let that happen. So what do you intend to do, Hyde?" She said it simply. "Until the election. Until my father wins and has the power to expose Ashford properly. Until there is law strong enough to stop him." "That is weeks away," Boone said. "The election is not until November." "I know." Clara looked around the small cabin. "I know it is too much to ask, but I have nowhere else to go. No one else I can trust." She paused. "You saved my life, Mr. Thatcher. I am not asking you to save it again. Just let me stay until I can figure out something else. Please." Boone stared at the fire for a long time. He thought about what she was asking, thought about what it would mean to let a stranger into his solitude, thought about the danger that would follow her inevitably to his door. He thought about Sarah, about Thomas, about the fire that had taken them because of what he was, what he had been. 20 years of hiding, 20 years of trying to outrun the blood on his hands, and here it was again, violence and conspiracy and powerful men who destroyed anyone in their way. He should say no, should take her down the mountain in the morning and let the world sort itself out. But he looked at her eyes, and he saw something he recognized, something he had seen in his own reflection for 2 decades, the knowledge that no one was coming to save her, that she was alone against forces too large to fight, that survival meant finding shelter wherever it could be found. "You can stay," he said. His voice came out rougher than intended. "Until we figure out something else." The relief that washed over her face was so profound that it hurt to witness. "Thank you." Thank you." "Do not thank me yet." Boone stood, moved to the window, looked out at the darkness. "You do not know who I am, what I have done. You might change your mind." "You saved my life," Clara said. "Whatever else you are, you did that." Boone did not respond. He just kept looking out at the night, at the snow, at the darkness that had been his only companion for so long. He had saved her life. That was true. But he was also the ghost of Shenandoah, the man who had killed 43 Union officers during the war, the man whose family had been murdered in revenge, the man who had killed her brother all those years ago on a battlefield neither of them could forget. She did not know that yet, but she would. Eventually she would. And when she did, he wondered, would she still thank him, or would she reach for that knife again? The days took on a rhythm after that, strange and awkward at first, then slowly settling into something that felt almost natural. Boone gave Clara the bed. He slept on the floor by the fire, wrapped in blankets, his rifle within arm's reach. She protested the first night. He ignored her protests. By the 3rd night, she had stopped making them. He kept distance between them, always. Not just physical distance, though there was that too, but something else. A wall he built with silence and averted eyes, and the careful way he moved around her, never crowding, never touching, never giving her reason to fear. She noticed. He could see it in the way she watched him, not with suspicion anymore, but with something like curiosity. Like she was trying to solve a puzzle she did not quite understand. She was healing well. The wounds on her wrists would scar, but they were closing cleanly. Her feet had recovered their color, though she walked carefully, still testing each step before committing. The bruises on her face had faded from purple to yellow and would soon disappear entirely. But the other wounds, the ones that did not show those, would take longer. She flinched at sudden sounds. Started awake in the night, gasping from dreams she never described. wrapped her arms around herself when she thought no one was watching, as if trying to hold the pieces of herself together through sheer force of will. Boone recognized these signs. He had seen them before, in soldiers, in survivors, in himself. He did not try to fix them, could not have fixed them even if he tried. He just made himself small and quiet and predictable, giving her nervous system time to remember that not every man was a threat. On the fourth morning she spoke first. "You never ask me questions," she said, "about myself, about what happened." Boone was making coffee, his back to her. He did not turn around. "You will tell me when you are ready. Most men would have demanded answers by now. I am not most men." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "No, you are not." He poured 2 cups, set one on the table beside the bed, took his own to the chair by the window. She reached for the cup, stopped, looked at the bandages on her wrists, then at him. "You tend my wounds every night," she said. "You cook my meals. You sleep on the floor so I can have the bed. But you never touch me unless you absolutely have to. Why? Because you have been hurt enough." Boone kept his eyes on the window. Because touch should be a choice, not an obligation. Most men do not think that way. Most men have never seen what happens when touch becomes terror. He finally looked at her. "I have." Something passed across her face. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. The acknowledgement of shared damage, even if the details differed. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for understanding." Boone nodded. Then he returned his attention to the window, to the snow, to the endless white that had become his world. "Do not thank me yet," he thought. "You do not know the worst of me." But that conversation would come. Soon enough it would come. On the 5th day, Boone returned from checking his trap lines to find Clara standing in the middle of the cabin holding something that made his blood freeze. His old army satchel, the one he kept in the chest beneath the floorboards, the one containing everything he had tried to bury along with his past. In her hands was a photograph, yellowed and cracked. A woman holding a baby, both of them smiling at the camera with the innocent joy of people who did not know what was coming. Sarah, Thomas, his wife, his son. Dead these 20 years. "I found it," Clara said. Her voice was strange, careful. "I was not snooping, I swear." The floor creaked and I thought. She stopped. "I am sorry. I should not have." Boone crossed the room in 3 strides. He took the photograph from her hands gently but firmly and returned it to the satchel without looking at it. Could not look at it. Had not looked at it in years. "My wife," he said. His voice came out like gravel. "My son. They died a long time ago." "How?" The question was soft, genuine. Not prying for information, but offering the same kind of listening he had given her. Boone should have lied, should have given her a story that did not matter, that would not change how she looked at him. Instead, the truth came out. "Fire," he said. "Someone set fire to our house while I was away. Sarah and Thomas were inside. I came back to find nothing but ashes and bones." Clara's hand went to her mouth. "Oh God, I am so sorry. It happened because of what I did during the war." Boone heard his own voice as if from a distance. "What I was. There were people who wanted revenge. They found my family before they found me. Who would do such a thing? A man named Ashford." Boone finally met her eyes. "Colonel Victor Ashford, the same man who is hunting you." The silence that followed was absolute. Clara stared at him, her face cycling through shock, then confusion, then something colder. "Ashford killed your family," she said slowly, 20 years ago. "And now he is trying to kill me. He believes I killed his brother during the war. At Shenandoah." Boone's jaw tightened. "He has been hunting me ever since. When he could not find me, he found them instead." "Shenandoah." Clara's voice had gone very quiet. "You fought at Shenandoah." "Yes. My brother died there. William Sinclair. He was 19 years old." "I know." The words fell like stones into water. Heavy. Final. Creating ripples that would spread until they touched everything. Clara stepped back. Her face had gone pale. "How do you know?" "Because I was there." Boone did not flinch from her gaze. "Because I was the one they called the Ghost of Shenandoah. The Confederate sniper who killed 43 Union officers during the war." Her breathing had changed. Faster now, shallower. "And my brother." Her voice cracked. "Was he one of them?" Boone reached into his shirt, drew out the leather cord that hung around his neck. On it was a gold ring too small for his fingers, inscribed with 2 letters. W.S. Clara made a sound, not a scream, not a sob, something between. Her hand reached out, then pulled back. "I took this from his hand," Boone said. His voice was steady, even though his heart was tearing itself apart. "After I shot him from 300 yards away. I have carried it for 24 years, as punishment, as reminder, as penance that can never be paid. You." Clara's voice was barely audible. "You killed William." "Yes." She stared at him, at the ring, at the face of the man who had saved her life, tended her wounds, given her shelter, the face of the man who had murdered her brother. "Why?" The word came out strangled. "Why did you tell me?" "Because you deserve the truth." Boone held her gaze. "Because you have been lied to enough. Because if you are going to hate me, you should hate me for what I actually did, not for some imagined crime." Clara's hands were shaking. Her whole body was shaking. The cabin suddenly felt very small, very close, suffocating. She moved toward the door. Boone did not stop her, did not try to explain further, just stood there holding the ring that had damned him for 2 decades, watching as she fled into the snow. The door slammed behind her. The sound echoed through the empty cabin like a gunshot. Boone closed his eyes. There it was, the truth, finally spoken, finally free. He had known this moment would come, had known she would run when she learned what he was, what he had done. He had not known how much it would hurt, but that did not matter. Her pain was justified, her hatred was earned. Whatever she decided now, he would accept. He owed her that much. He owed her brother that much. Clara stood in the snow chest, heaving lungs burning from the cold air. Tears streamed down her face, freezing on her cheeks before they could fall. William, the brother she had never known, the name spoken in whispers at family dinners, the ghost that had haunted her parents their entire lives, killed by the man who had just saved hers. She wanted to scream, wanted to run down the mountain and never look back, wanted to find a knife and bury it in his heart the way he had buried a bullet in her brother's. But her feet would not move, her hands would not clench. Her rage, hot as it burned, would not ignite into action, because she kept seeing his face, not the face of a killer, the face of a man carrying guilt so heavy it had bent him double for 24 years. "I have carried it as penance," he had said, "penance that can never be paid." She thought about what she knew of Boone Thatcher, how he had found her dying in the snow and carried her to safety, how he had tended her wounds with hands so gentle they might have been a woman's, how he had given her space, given her choices, given her something she had not felt since this nightmare began. Respect. Not the false respect of men who wanted something from her. True respect. The kind that came from seeing another person as fully human, fully worthy, fully deserving of dignity, even in their worst moments. The man who had killed her brother had shown her more respect in 5 days than most men showed her in a lifetime. How was she supposed to reconcile that? She stood in the snow until her feet went numb, until her tears ran dry, until the cold forced her back toward the only warmth for 30 miles. The cabin door was still closed when she reached it. She could see smoke rising from the chimney, could imagine him inside waiting, waiting for her verdict, waiting to learn if she would return or vanish into the white forever. Clara put her hand on the door, hesitated. Her brother would have wanted her to forgive. William had been like that according to the letters her parents saved. Kind, understanding, quick to see the humanity in even his enemies. He wrote once that war makes monsters of us all, her mother had told her. He said the only way forward was compassion. Could she be compassionate to the man who had stolen William's future? Could she be anything else to the man who had saved her present? Clara opened the door. Boone stood exactly where she had left him. The ring still hung from his neck, glinting in the firelight. His face showed nothing. His eyes showed everything. She crossed the room slowly, stopped 3 feet from him, close enough to see the gray in his beard, the lines carved by 2 decades of guilt, the terrible patient stillness of a man who expected to be condemned. "My brother wrote a letter," she said. "Before he died, he said war makes monsters of us all. He said the only path forward was compassion." Boone said nothing, just listened. "I do not know if I can forgive you." Clara's voice was steady now, though her hands still trembled. "I do not know if I can look at you without seeing William's face, without wondering who he might have become if he had lived. I understand. But I know this." She stepped closer. "You are not the same man who killed my brother. That man died 24 years ago in a fire that took everything he loved. The man standing in front of me now, he is someone else. Someone who has been trying to become better. Someone who saved my life when he had every reason to let me die." She reached out, touched the ring that hung around his neck, felt him stiffen at the contact. "Keep this," she said. "Keep carrying it. Not as punishment, but as remembrance. Remember my brother. Remember what war cost both of you. And let that memory make you kinder, not crueler." Boone's eyes had gone bright, not tears, not quite, but something close. "I do not deserve your mercy," he said. "Maybe not." Clara let go of the ring. "But I am giving it anyway, because holding on to hatred would poison me more than it would punish you. And because," I think she paused, "I think my brother would have wanted me to choose grace." Silence fell between them. The fire crackled. The wind whispered against the windows. Then Boone did something she had not seen him do before. He smiled, just slightly, just enough to crack the mask of stoic endurance he had worn since she met him. "Your brother," he said softly, "must have been a remarkable man." "He was." Clara smiled back, though it hurt. "And I think given time you could be too." She turned and walked to the bed, suddenly exhausted beyond words. The emotional storm had drained her completely. She needed sleep, needed time to process everything that had just happened. Behind her she heard Boone move, heard him settle into his chair by the fire, heard the soft sound of his breathing as he resumed his vigil. She closed her eyes. They had crossed something tonight, some threshold that could not be uncrossed. They were no longer just survivor and rescuer. They were something else now, something more complicated, more real. The man who killed her brother, the woman who chose not to hate him. What happened next, she had no idea. But for the first time since this nightmare began, Clara Sinclair felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. Outside the cabin the snow continued to fall, and somewhere in the darkness men on horseback were already riding north, looking for a girl, looking for a ghost, coming closer with every passing hour. The morning after Clara's decision to stay brought something neither of them expected: peace. Not the fragile peace of avoidance, but something sturdier, something built on truth, however painful that truth had been. Boone woke before dawn, as he always did. He lay still on his pallet by the fire, listening to Clara's breathing from the bed, slow, even, the breathing of someone who had finally found rest after too many nights of terror. He rose quietly, added wood to the fire, put coffee on to boil. These small rituals had become the architecture of his days over 20 years of solitude. Now they felt different. Not lonely, just quiet. Clara stirred as the smell of coffee filled the cabin. He heard her stretch, heard the small sound of pain as her healing wounds protested the movement. Then her voice rough with sleep. "What time is it early?" Boone did not turn around. "Coffee will be ready soon." She sat up slowly, wrapping the blanket around her shoulders. He could feel her eyes on his back as he worked, assessing, recalibrating, trying to integrate the man she saw now with the killer she had learned about the night before. "I dreamed about William," she said quietly. "First time in years." Boone said nothing, just poured 2 cups and carried one to the small table beside the bed. He was laughing. Clara continued taking the cup with both hands. In my dream, running through a field of wheat, he looked happy. That is a good dream. Yes. She sipped the coffee. It is. She paused. I think he sent it to me, to tell me I made the right choice. Boone finally met her eyes. Do you believe that the dead can send messages I did not use to? Clara looked into her cup. Now I am not so sure. The world is stranger than I thought it was 3 weeks ago. More terrible, but maybe more wonderful too. They sat in comfortable silence as the cabin brightened with dawn. Outside the snow had stopped falling, but the world remained buried in white. No tracks, no signs of life, just endless pristine stillness, which meant they had time, but not much. Ashford will send more men, Boone said, breaking the silence. When the 2 from the road do not report back, he will send more and they will come looking. I know. Clara's voice was steady. How long do we have a day? Maybe 2. Depends on how organized he is. Depends on whether he knows about this cabin. Does he? Boone shook his head slowly. I do not think so. I have been careful, but careful is not the same as certain. So what do? We have options. Boone moved to the window, looking out at the mountain. We can run, head deeper into the mountains where no one can follow, wait out the winter. But that means leaving everything behind. Your evidence, your father, any chance of stopping Ashford before the election, and the other options. We stand. Boone turned to face her. We find allies. We gather strength. And when Ashford's men come, we are ready for them. Clara considered this. Her face had taken on the focused intensity he was beginning to recognize, the expression of a woman who had stopped being a victim and started being a strategist. Who would help us? My father cannot know where I am. It would put him in danger. There is a man. Boone said it slowly, reluctantly. Jesse Cortez. He owns a ranch in the valley south of here. He hates Ashford, has been fighting him for years over water rights and land disputes. He might be willing to help. Do you trust him? I do not trust anyone. Boone's voice was flat. But I trust that his hatred of Ashford is genuine, and sometimes shared enemies make better allies than shared friends. Clara nodded slowly. Then we go to him. Not we. I go. You stay here where it is safe. No. The word was simple. Final. Clara set down her coffee cup and met his gaze directly. I am not staying here alone while you ride off to negotiate on my behalf. This is my fight, Mr. Thatcher, my evidence, my father's campaign. If we are going to ask someone to risk their life for this cause, they deserve to hear it from me. Not secondhand. It is dangerous. Everything is dangerous. She stood, ignoring the twinge of pain from her healing feet. I walked through a blizzard with no shoes. I stabbed a man who was trying to drag me to my death. I think I can handle a horseback ride to a neighboring ranch. Boone studied her for a long moment. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite approval, not quite admiration, something between. You are stubborn, he said finally. I prefer determined. The ghost of a smile crossed his weathered face. Fine, we leave at midday when the snow is firmest, but you do exactly what I tell you when I tell you. Out there, my word is law. Understood? Understood. Good. Boone moved toward the door. I need to prepare the horses. You need to eat. We have a long ride ahead. He stepped outside, closing the door behind him. Clara watched him go, then turned to look at the small cabin that had become her sanctuary. 1 week ago, she had been a socialite from Boston, educated and sheltered, and utterly unprepared for the violence of the frontier. Now she was planning strategy with a former Confederate sniper, preparing to ride through hostile territory to recruit an unknown ally against a man who wanted her dead. The world was indeed stranger than she had thought. She smiled despite everything. Or maybe because of everything. At least it was not boring. They rode out at noon, following trails that Boone knew from 20 years of wandering these mountains. Clara rode behind him on a sturdy mare wrapped in borrowed furs, her hands still bandaged but steady on the reins. The world around them was beautiful in the way that only winter mountains can be beautiful, terrible and serene at once. The snow caught the sunlight and threw it back in blinding sheets of white. The pines stood like dark sentinels against the sky. And above everything, the peaks rose in jagged lines, ancient and indifferent to the small dramas playing out beneath them. They did not speak for the first hour. Boone rode ahead, his eyes scanning the terrain with the practiced vigilance of a man who had survived by never relaxing. Clara followed, learning the rhythm of mountain travel, letting her body adjust to the horse's movement. Then, as they crested a ridge overlooking a vast white valley, he spoke. "Cortez's ranch is another 2 hours south. We should make it before dark." "Tell me about him," Clara said. "What kind of man is he?" "Mexican and Anglo mixed. His father came north during the gold rush, married a local woman, started ranching when the gold ran out. Jesse built it into one of the biggest spreads in the territory, and Ashford has been trying to buy him out for years. Wants the water rights, wants the grazing land, wants everything the way men like Ashford always do. But Cortez will not sell." "No." Boone's voice held something like respect. "He is proud, maybe too proud, but he is also honest, which is more than I can say for most men in this territory." They descended into the valley, following a creek bed that was frozen solid beneath the snow. The horses picked their way carefully, and Clara found herself admiring the sure-footed way Boone guided his mount through the difficult terrain. "You are good with horses," she observed. "I have had a lot of practice. In the war before, during, after." He did not elaborate. They rode in silence for another mile. Then Clara asked the question that had been forming in her mind since they left the cabin. "Why did you stay here? After Sarah and Thomas died, why did you not leave Montana entirely?" Boone was quiet for so long that she thought he would not answer. Then he said simply, "Because this is where they are buried." "Oh." Clara felt something tighten in her chest. "I did not realize. There is a clearing near my cabin, a place where the wildflowers grow in spring. I buried them there under a stone I carved myself." He paused. "I could not leave them. Even after everything. I could not leave them alone." Clara said nothing. What was there to say? Some griefs were too deep for words. You could only witness them and let them be. They rode on the silence between them, different now, heavier, but also more real. The sun was touching the western peaks when they finally saw the ranch. It spread across the valley floor like a small village, the main house surrounded by barns and outbuildings, corrals full of cattle smoke rising from multiple chimneys. Men were working in the yard. They looked up as the two riders approached, their hands moving toward weapons before recognition softened their postures. Boone stopped at the edge of the property and raised one hand in greeting. "Looking for Jesse Cortez," he called. "Tell him Boone Thatcher needs to speak with him." One of the men nodded and jogged toward the main house. The others remained watching with the cautious curiosity of people who had learned that strangers often meant trouble. 5 minutes passed. Then the door of the main house opened and a man stepped out. Jesse Cortez was 38 years old, with the dark hair and weathered skin of someone who had spent his life under the Montana sun. He moved with the easy confidence of a man on his own territory, but his eyes were sharp and assessing. "Boone Thatcher." His voice carried across the yard. "I heard you were dead. Rumors of my death have been exaggerated." "So I see." Cortez's eyes moved to Clara, taking in the furs, the bandaged hands, the face that was clearly not from these parts. "And who is this Clara Sinclair?" Boone said. "Harrison Sinclair's daughter." The change in Cortez's expression was subtle but unmistakable. Interest sharpened into something more focused, more dangerous. The politician's daughter. He stepped off the porch, approaching them slowly. "The one who disappeared 3 weeks ago. The one half the territory is looking for. The same." Cortez stopped 10 feet from Clara's horse and looked up at her directly. "Miss Sinclair, you are a long way from home." "I am aware, Mr. Cortez." Clara kept her voice steady. "I am also aware that you have no reason to help me. But I am hoping you will listen to what I have to say before you make that decision." Cortez studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled, and the expression transformed his face from wary to welcoming. "Anyone who travels this far in this weather deserves at least a cup of coffee and a warm fire. Come inside, both of you." We will talk." The inside of Cortez's house was warmer than Clara had expected. A large fire burned in the main room, and the furniture, while rough-hewn, was comfortable. A woman appeared from the kitchen to take their coats, her face curious but discreet. My sister, Maria Cortez, explained. "She runs the household. I just sign the checks." Clara smiled despite herself. "It is a pleasure to meet you, Maria." Maria nodded, her eyes lingering on Clara's bandaged hands with quiet concern. Then she disappeared, returning moments later with coffee and fresh bread. They sat around the fire, the three of them, while Clara told her story. She started from the beginning, from her arrival in Montana to help her father's campaign. She described finding the evidence of Ashford's corruption, the list of bribes, the proof that he had bought half the territory's officials. She described being betrayed, being captured, the desperate flight through the blizzard, the men she had killed, the near death from which Boone had saved her. When she finished, Cortez sat in silence for a long time. His coffee had gone cold in his hands. "You have proof of all this?" he finally asked. "I have a copy of the list, sewn into my dress. The original is hidden somewhere safe, where I would rather not say. The fewer people who know, the safer it is." Cortez nodded slowly. "Fair enough." He set down his cup and leaned forward. "So what exactly are you asking me, Miss Sinclair, help?" Clara met his eyes directly. "Ashford will send more men. He will not stop until he has me and the evidence destroyed. Boone cannot fight an army alone. I need allies, people who hate Ashford enough to stand against him. And you think I am such a person? I know you have fought him for years. I know he has tried to destroy you. I know that if he wins the Senate seat, he will have enough power to take everything you have built." Cortez's jaw tightened. "You have done your research. I am my father's daughter. Politics is in my blood." Silence fell. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind had picked up again, whistling around the corners of the house. Then Cortez laughed. A genuine sound surprised out of him. "You have courage, Miss Sinclair. I will give you that." He shook his head. "Most women in your position would be hiding in a corner, waiting for someone else to solve their problems. You ride into a stranger's ranch and ask him to join a war. Most women have not had to stab a man to save their own lives." Clara's voice was calm. "Desperation clarifies priorities." "Indeed it does." Cortez looked at Boone. "What is your stake in this, Thatcher? Why are you helping her?" Boone's answer was simple. "Because Ashford killed my family, and because this is the right thing to do." Cortez absorbed this. Then he stood walking to the window to look out at the darkening sky. "I have 8 men who work for me," he said slowly. "Good men, loyal, but not soldiers. If Ashford sends his full force against us, we cannot win a direct fight." "What about indirect?" Clara asked. Cortez turned back to face her. A smile was playing at the corners of his mouth. "Now you are speaking my language, Miss Sinclair." He returned to his chair. "Tell me more about what you have in mind." They talked for 2 hours. Strategy, tactics, the terrain of the territory and how it could be used, the weaknesses in Ashford's organization and how they could be exploited. Clara found herself impressed by Cortez's mind. He was not just a rancher. He was a chess player, someone who thought 3 moves ahead, who understood that wars were won not by brute force, but by positioning and patience. By the time Maria called them to dinner, they had the beginnings of a plan. "Ashford's strength is his control of the law," Clara summarized. "Sheriffs, deputies, judges, all bought and paid for. If we attack that control, force them to choose between Ashford and their own reputations, we weaken him." "But how?" Boone asked. "If we release your evidence now, Ashford will claim it is forged. His people in the press will bury the story." "We need a witness," Cortez said. "Someone on the inside who can verify the documents. Someone Ashford trusts." Clara's eyes narrowed. "I might know someone. A man who helped me get into Ashford's office in the first place. I thought he betrayed me, but now I am not so sure. He may have been trying to help in his own way." "Who?" "His name is Fletcher Hastings. He is a journalist from Helena. He has been investigating Ashford for 2 years." "A journalist." Cortez looked skeptical. Can he be trusted? I do not know, Clara admitted. But he has skills we need, connections in the press, access to people we cannot reach. It is a risk, Boone said. Everything is a risk. Clara met his eyes. The question is whether it is a risk worth taking. The silence that followed was heavy with calculation. Then Cortez nodded. I will send a man to Helena tomorrow. Discreetly. We will find this Hastings and see what he knows. Thank you. Do not thank me yet, Miss Sinclair. We are a long way from victory. He stood. For now you will stay here, both of you. My ranch is easier to defend than a cabin on a mountainside, and my men will give us early warning if anyone approaches. Boone shook his head. I should return to the cabin. If Ashford's men track Clara there, they need to find nothing. They also need to find no one. Cortez countered. A dead body raises questions. A missing man just raises rumors. Boone considered this. Then reluctantly he nodded. Fine. But I keep my weapons close. I would expect nothing less. Maria showed them to separate rooms on the second floor. The beds were real beds with mattresses and clean sheets, and Clara nearly wept at the comfort of it. But before she could sleep, there was a knock at her door. She opened it to find Boone standing in the hallway, his face unreadable. I wanted to say something, he said quietly, before tomorrow brings whatever it brings. What? He reached into his shirt and drew out the ring. William's ring. It caught the lamplight gleaming softly. I have been thinking about what you said, about carrying this as remembrance instead of punishment. He paused. I do not know if I can do that. The guilt does not go away just because you tell it to. I know, but I can try. He met her eyes. For the first time in 24 years, I can try to become someone worth saving instead of someone waiting to be punished. Clara reached out and touched his hand, the one holding the ring. She felt him stiffen at the contact, then slowly relax. That is all anyone can do, she said. Try. They stood there for a moment, connected by a touch and a piece of gold that had witnessed so much death. Then Boone pulled back, tucking the ring away. Sleep well, Miss Sinclair. Tomorrow will be a long day. Good night, Mr. Thatcher. She closed the door and leaned against it, her heart beating faster than it should. Something was changing between them. Something beyond forgiveness, beyond shared purpose. Something that felt dangerous and wonderful and terrifying. She went to bed thinking of him. And for the first time in her life, she dreamed not of escape, but of something worth staying for. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. Cortez sent 2 of his men to Helena to find Fletcher Hastings. Others were dispatched to neighboring ranches carrying carefully worded messages that said nothing directly but suggested much. The network of people who hated Ashford was larger than Clara had realized, and Cortez knew how to activate it without raising suspicion. Meanwhile, Clara and Boone waited. They trained. They planned. And slowly, carefully, they began to know each other in ways that went beyond crisis and survival. Clara learned that Boone had been born in Tennessee, the son of a preacher who had died before the war. She learned that he had joined the Confederate Army at 16, not for ideology, but for survival, and that his skills with a rifle had made him valuable in ways he never wanted. She learned that he had married Sarah when he was 22, that Thomas had been born a year later, and that for 3 brief years he had known something like happiness before it was taken away. He learned that she had been raised in Boston society, educated at a women's college, and groomed to be the wife of some suitable politician. He learned that she had always felt suffocated by those expectations that she had come west, partly to help her father and partly to escape her own gilded cage. He learned that she was smarter than anyone gave her credit for, braver than she knew, and more stubborn than any woman he had ever met. They did not touch. Not beyond what necessity required. But something was building between them, a current that ran beneath every conversation, every shared glance, every moment when they found themselves alone. Clara felt it most strongly in the evenings when the work was done and the house grew quiet. She would find Boone on the porch watching the stars and join him without speaking. They would stand side by side, not touching, but somehow together in ways that had nothing to do with physical contact. On the third night she asked him, "What are you thinking about?" "The future," he said. "Something I have not thought about in a very long time." "What about the future? Whether I have one?" He turned to look at her. "Whether someone like me can build something instead of just destroying things." "You have already started building," Clara said. "You saved my life. That is something. It is not enough. Then do more." She met his gaze steadily. "The war ended 24 years ago, Boone. The man who killed my brother, he does not exist anymore. The man standing here now, he can be whoever he chooses to be." Boone was silent for a long moment. Then he said quietly, "You make it sound easy. It is not easy. Nothing worth doing is easy. But it is possible." She paused. "I believe that. I have to believe it. Otherwise, what is any of this for?" He did not answer, but something in his expression shifted, softened, opened. And Clara felt for the first time that she might be reaching the man beneath the ghost. The peace shattered on the fourth morning. Cortez's scout came riding in hard, his horse lathered and blowing. Clara and Boone were in the yard when he arrived, and they saw his face before he spoke. "Riders," the scout gasped. "Coming from the north. At least 10, maybe more." "How far?" 2 hours. Maybe less." Cortez was already moving, shouting orders. His men scattered to defensive positions. Maria disappeared into the house, emerging moments later with rifles and ammunition. "Is it Ashford?" Clara asked. "Who else?" Cortez's voice was grim. "Someone must have talked. Or he has better trackers than I thought. What do we do?" "We fight." Cortez met her eyes. "Or we run. But running means losing everything we have built, everything we have planned." "Then we fight," Clara said. No hesitation, no fear. Cortez nodded slowly. "You heard the lady," he called to his men. "Defensive positions. No one fires until I give the word." The next hour was a chaos of preparation. Barricades went up, weapons were distributed. Cortez positioned his 8 men at strategic points around the ranch, creating overlapping fields of fire. Boone moved through it all like a man in his element. This was what he had been trained for, what he had spent 20 years trying to forget. The tactics of war, the geometry of death. He found Clara loading a rifle near the main house. "You should go inside," he said. "Stay with Maria." Clara's hands were steady on the weapon. "I know how to shoot. My father taught me. This is not target practice." "I know." She looked up at him. "But I am not hiding while other people fight for me. Not anymore." Boone studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded, a flicker of something like pride crossing his weathered face. "Stay near the house. Keep your head down. And if things go bad," she stopped him with a hand on his arm. "They will not," she said, "because you will not let them." Before he could respond, a shout went up from the perimeter. "Riders," someone yelled, "coming in fast." And then there was no more time for words. They came from the north, as the scout had said. 12 riders in all, led by a man Clara recognized even at a distance, Deputy Rohr Madsen. He wore his badge prominently, as if it justified everything he was about to do. His face was the face of a man who enjoyed his work, who took pleasure in hunting down those weaker than himself. Behind him rode 11 men, hard men, armed men, the kind of men who asked no questions as long as the pay was good. They stopped 100 yards from the ranch, spreading out into a line that covered the entire approach. Madsen rode forward alone, his hands visible, a white kerchief tied to his rifle. "Flag of truce," he called. "I just want to talk." Cortez stepped onto the porch, his rifle cradled in his arms. "Talk, then. I am looking for a woman, Clara Sinclair. Word is she is here. You were misinformed." Madsen smiled. The expression made Clara's skin crawl. "See, I do not think I was. I think she is in that house right now, watching us through a window. And I think you are harboring a fugitive from justice, Mr. Cortez." Fugitive Cortez's voice was cold. "What crime has she committed?" "That is between her and Colonel Ashford. Ashford is not the law. Neither are you." Madsen's smile widened. "Actually, I am. This badge says so. And I have a warrant for Miss Sinclair's arrest, signed by Judge Patterson himself. Patterson is in Ashford's pocket. Everyone knows it." "Careful," Madsen said. That sounds like contempt for the court. He paused. Here is how this is going to work. You send out the girl. We leave. No one gets hurt. Simple. And if I refuse, then things get complicated. Madsen gestured to the men behind him. I have 12 guns here. How many do you have enough? The two men stared at each other across the distance. The tension was a physical thing, a pressure that built with every passing second. Then Madsen shrugged. Have it your way. He turned his horse and rode back to his men. You have 1 hour to reconsider. After that, we come in. The hour passed in agonizing slowness. Clara paced the main room of the house, her rifle in her hands, her mind racing through options that all led nowhere good. I should surrender, she said. End this before anyone else gets hurt. No. Boone's voice was flat. They will kill you. They will kill everyone here if I do not. They will try to kill everyone here regardless. Boone was checking his weapons, his movements precise and economical. Ashford cannot afford witnesses. The moment you surrender, Cortez and his men become loose ends. Clara knew he was right. She had known it all along, but knowing did not make the weight any easier to bear. How do we win? She asked. 12 against 9, with them having the advantage of mobility. We do not have to win. Boone finished checking his rifle and looked up at her. We just have to survive until help arrives. What help? Cortez sent word to Helena 3 days ago. If his messenger got through, there should be a federal marshal on his way. Maybe more. If. That is a lot of uncertainty. It is all we have. The hour ended with a gunshot, not aimed at them, aimed at the sky, a signal that negotiation was over. Then the riders charged. The battle for Cortez's ranch lasted 43 minutes, though it felt like hours. Madsen's men came in hard and fast, firing as they rode. Cortez's people answered from behind their barricades, the crack of rifles splitting the winter air. 2 of Madsen's men went down in the first exchange. A third wheeled away, clutching his arm. But the others kept coming, spreading out to flank the defenders. Boone moved through the chaos like a ghost. He appeared at one position, fired twice, and was gone before the enemy could locate him. Appeared at another, dropped a man who was trying to climb the corral fence, and vanished again. Clara stayed near the house firing when she had clear shots, keeping her head down when she did not. Her hands shook, but her aim was steady. Years of target practice paid off when it mattered. She saw one of Cortez's men go down, clutching his leg. Another took a bullet to the shoulder, but kept fighting. The air filled with smoke and shouting, and the terrible sounds of men trying to kill each other. Then Madsen's men reached the barn. 3 of them dismounted and went inside. A moment later, flames began to lick at the wooden walls. Fire, someone shouted. They are burning us out. Cortez was already moving, leading 2 of his men toward the barn, but Madsen had anticipated this. 6 riders converged on his position, driving him back. The barn burned higher. The flames spread to the adjacent outbuilding. The cattle in the corrals panicked, crashing against the fences. In the chaos, Clara lost sight of Boone. Then she saw him, on the roof of the main house, his rifle raised, his eye to the scope. Madsen was 50 yards away, directing his men. He never saw the bullet coming. It caught him in the shoulder, spinning him from his horse. He hit the ground hard and did not get up. With their leader down, the remaining attackers hesitated. That hesitation cost them. Cortez rallied his men. Boone kept firing from the roof. Clara picked off a man who was trying to drag Madsen to safety. In the end, 8 of the 12 attackers lay dead or wounded. The remaining 4 fled north, leaving their deputy behind. The battle was over, but the cost was high. They found the body of Cortez's foreman in the corral. He had been shot through the chest trying to save the horses. Another of Cortez's men died before they could get him inside, his wound too severe for the ranch's limited medical supplies. Madsen survived. He would not talk, would not say anything except that they were all dead men, that Ashford would come for them with an army. They locked him in the root cellar and posted a guard. That night, as the fires smoldered and the wounded were tended, Clara found Boone standing alone at the edge of the property. He was looking north toward the darkness where the surviving attackers had fled. "They will be back," she said. "With more men." "Yes, we need to move. Get to Helena before Ashford can regroup." "I know." Boone did not look at her. but I need to tell you something first." "What?" He finally turned. His face was drawn, exhausted, but his eyes burned with something she had not seen before. "When Madsen charged, I was afraid," he said, "not afraid of dying, afraid of losing you." He paused. "I have not been afraid of losing someone in 20 years, Clara. I did not know I could still feel that." She stepped closer, close enough to touch if she wanted to. "Is that a bad thing I do not know? It changes things, changes me." He met her eyes. "I do not know how to be someone who cares about whether he lives or dies." "Then learn." Clara reached out and took his hand, the same hand that had killed her brother, the same hand that had saved her life. "Learn with me." Boone looked at their joined hands, then at her face, then back at their hands. "You deserve better than a broken old man with blood on his hands." "Maybe." She squeezed his fingers. "But you are what I want." The silence stretched between them. The wind whispered through the charred remains of the barn. The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to the drama below. Then Boone lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss against her knuckles. "I will try to deserve you," he said. "I cannot promise I will succeed, but I will try. That is all I ask." They stood there in the darkness, connected by their hands and by something deeper, something that had been growing since that first night in the snow, something that felt, despite everything, like hope. The next morning brought a new complication. A woman arrived at the ranch, young, desperate, carrying an infant in her arms. Her name, she said, was Margaret Webb, and she was looking for Boone Thatcher. The moment Boone saw her, his face went pale. "I do not know you," he said. But Margaret's words told a different story. "I am your wife," she said, "and this is your son." Clara felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Wife-son. Everything she had begun to believe about Boone, about them, shattered into 1,000 pieces. She looked at his face, searching for truth, searching for the lie that would explain this away, but she could not find either. Only confusion, only shock, only the desperate expression of a man whose carefully constructed world was collapsing around him. "I have never seen this woman before," Boone said. "I do not know her. I do not have a son." Margaret began to cry, to accuse, to tell a story of abandonment and betrayal that sounded horribly plausible, and Clara did not know who to believe. The question hung in the air like smoke from the still-burning barn, the question that would determine everything that came next. Who was telling the truth, and what would remain of them when the truth was finally known? The question hung in the air unanswered. The battle was won, but the war was far from over, and the deepest wounds were yet to come. The accusation hung in the air like gun smoke after battle. Margaret Webb stood in the doorway of Cortez's ranch house, her infant clutched to her chest, tears streaming down her face. Behind her, the morning sun cast long shadows across the yard where the dead had been buried just hours before. "This is your son," she said again, her voice breaking. "His name is James. He is 3 months old, and you abandoned us both." Clara watched Boone's face. She had learned to read him over. These past weeks had learned the subtle shifts in his expression that revealed what his words would not. Now she saw confusion, genuine confusion, and beneath it something that looked like fear. "I have never met this woman," Boone said. His voice was steady, but his hands were not. "I have never been to Denver. I have not touched a woman since Sarah died." Liar Margaret's scream startled the baby, who began to cry. "You came to the hotel where I worked. You told me you were a merchant. You said you would marry me. Then you disappeared when I told you I was pregnant." Clara stepped forward. Her mind was racing, sorting through possibilities, looking for the truth beneath the accusations. "How did you find him?" she asked. "If he abandoned you in Denver, how did you know to come here?" Margaret's eyes shifted. "Just for a moment, just long enough to notice. I asked around," she said. "People remembered him, what people Boone demanded. I have not left these mountains in 5 years. No one in Denver knows my name. Someone knew." Margaret's chin lifted defiantly. "Someone knew exactly where to find you." And just like that, Clara understood. "Who sent you?" she asked quietly. "What? Who told you where to find Boone Thatcher? Who gave you his description? Who paid for your journey here?" Margaret's face changed. The grief was still there, but something else flickered beneath it, something that looked like guilt. "I do not know what you are talking about," she said, but her voice had lost its conviction. Clara moved closer. She had dealt with liars in Boston society, had learned to recognize the small inconsistencies that revealed deception. This woman was lying about something. The question was what? "The baby," Clara said. "How old did you say he was?" "3 months. "And when did Boone supposedly leave Denver?" "About a year ago." Margaret was trying to remember her story, trying to keep the details straight. "So you were pregnant for over a year before giving birth." Clara's voice was gentle but relentless. "That is quite remarkable." Margaret's face crumbled. The carefully constructed lie collapsed under the weight of simple mathematics. "He is not mine," she whispered. "The baby. He belongs to my sister. She died in childbirth, and I—" She sank to her knees, sobbing. The infant wailed in her arms. "They came to me," she said between sobs. "Men working for someone powerful. They said if I did this, if I came here and told this story, they would pay my debts, give me enough money to start over. They said no one would get hurt." "Who?" Boone's voice was hard now. "Who sent you? I do not know his name, just that he was important. Rich. He had a military bearing." Ashford, Cortez said from the doorway. He had been listening. "It has to be Ashford." Clara felt the pieces click into place. Of course. When direct assault failed, Ashford had turned to another weapon. Scandal. Reputation. If he could not kill Boone Thatcher, he would destroy him. And if Boone was exposed as an adulterer and deadbeat father, no one would believe anything he said about Ashford's corruption. Clever. Evil, but clever. "What happens now?" Margaret asked. Her voice was small, defeated. "Will you kill me?" "No." Clara surprised herself with the word. "We are not murderers." She looked at Boone. "Are we?" Boone stared at the sobbing woman for a long moment. His face was unreadable. Then he shook his head. "No, we are not." He turned away. "But you cannot stay here. You have endangered everyone on this ranch with your lies. I have nowhere to go." Clara made a decision. She would probably regret it later. But mercy was not something she was willing to surrender, no matter how many times it was exploited. "We will give you money," she said, "enough to get to Oregon, start over where no one knows you. But you have to leave today, and you have to tell us everything you know about the men who hired you." Margaret nodded frantically. "Anything. I will tell you anything." They interrogated her for an hour. The details she provided were limited but useful. 2 men had approached her in Denver. They had known things about Boone that only someone with access to military records would know. They had provided her with a photograph, a description, and a carefully crafted story. They also told her where to find him, which meant Ashford had known about Cortez's ranch all along. The attack by Madson's men had not been a hunt. It had been a diversion, a way to fix their attention while Margaret approached from another direction. The scandal was supposed to break them apart, drive Clara away from Boone, isolate them both so they could be picked off separately. Instead, it had revealed the depth of Ashford's planning and his desperation. "He is afraid," Clara said after Margaret had been sent away with 2 of Cortez's men as escort. "If he is resorting to tactics like this, it means he knows his position is weaker than he wants us to believe. Or it means he is willing to do anything to win," Boone countered. "Desperate men are dangerous men. Then we make him more desperate. We take the fight to him." How Clara smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "We go to Helena, we find Fletcher Hastings, and we publish everything." The ride to Helena took 2 days. They traveled at night following back trails that Boone knew from decades of avoiding human contact. Clara rode beside him, her body finally strong enough to handle extended travel, her mind sharp with plans that grew more detailed with each mile. Cortez stayed behind to defend his ranch. But he sent 3 of his men with them, hard-faced cowboys who did not ask questions and did not complain about the cold. They were not soldiers, but they knew how to fight. That would have to be enough. On the first night, they camped in a narrow canyon that offered shelter from the wind. Clara sat beside the fire maps spread before her, planning their approach to the city. "We need to move fast," she said. "Once we reach Helena, Ashford will know. His people are everywhere. We have maybe 12 hours before he can mobilize against us. Long enough to find Hastings. It has to be." Boone sat across from her, cleaning his rifle with the methodical care of a man who had survived by maintaining his weapons. The firelight carved deep shadows into his weathered face. "I have been thinking," he said without looking up. "About what? About what happens after, if we survive this, if we win." "What then?" Clara set down her maps. "I do not know. I have not thought that far ahead." "I have." He finally met her eyes. 20 years of solitude, Clara. 20 years of believing I deserved nothing but punishment. Now I want things I never thought I would want again." He paused. "A future, a home, someone to share them with." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. "Are you asking me something? Mr. Thatcher, I am telling you something." He set down the rifle. "Whatever happens in Helena, I want you to know. You have changed me. Changed what I thought was possible." Clara felt her heart beating faster. She had felt this coming for days, had tried to ignore it to focus on survival and strategy and all the practical concerns that demanded her attention. But some things could not be ignored forever. "I care for you too," she said quietly. "More than I should give in everything, more than is wise. Wisdom is overrated." She laughed despite herself, a soft sound in the cold darkness. "Perhaps it is." She reached across the fire and took his hand. "Whatever happens, Boone, whatever comes, we face it together." He squeezed her fingers. His hands were rough with calluses scarred from decades of hard living, but their touch was gentle. Together he agreed. They sat there until the fire burned low, hands clasped, watching the stars wheel overhead. Tomorrow would bring danger. Tomorrow would bring choices that could not be unmade. But tonight there was this: two broken people finding something whole in each other. It was enough. For now, it was enough. Helena appeared on the second afternoon, sprawling across the valley like a boom town that had decided to stay. Buildings of brick and wood crowded together, their chimneys pouring smoke into the gray sky. The streets were full of people, merchants and miners and politicians, jostling for position in the territorial capital. Clara had visited once before when she first arrived in Montana. The city had seemed exciting then, full of possibility. Now it looked like a battlefield, every corner potentially hiding enemies. Where would Hastings be? Boone asked. The newspaper office. The Helena Independent. She pointed toward a building near the center of town. If he is still investigating Ashford, he will be there. And if he has been compromised, then we improvise. They left the horses at a stable on the outskirts and entered the city on foot. Cortez's men spread out, watching for threats, while Boone and Clara made their way toward the newspaper. The streets were busy enough to provide cover, but dangerous for the same reason. Anyone could be watching. Anyone could be reporting back to Ashford. Clara kept her head down, her face partially hidden by a bonnet borrowed from Maria. Boone walked beside her, his hand never far from the pistol at his hip. They reached the newspaper office without incident. A small miracle. The building was modest. 2 stories, brick facade, a sign that read, Helena Independent in faded gold letters. Through the window, Clara could see people moving inside. Presses running. The machinery of truth still operating despite everything. "Wait here," Boone said. "I will go in first. Make sure it is safe." "No." Clara shook her head. "If Hastings sees you first, he might run. He knows me. I will go." "Clara, I can do this, Boone. Trust me." He hesitated, then nodded. 5 minutes. If you are not out in 5 minutes, I am coming in." "Fair enough." She pushed through the door before she could lose her nerve. The inside of the newspaper office smelled of ink and paper and coffee that had been sitting too long. Men in shirt sleeves worked at desks, some writing, some setting type. No one looked up when she entered. Clara scanned the room. looking for a face she had seen only once briefly in the chaos of her first days in Montana. There, in the back, a man with copper-colored hair and green eyes bent over a stack of papers, his expression focused and intent. Fletcher Hastings. She approached carefully, aware of the eyes that were starting to notice her. A woman in a newspaper office was unusual enough to draw attention. "Mr. Hastings." He looked up. His eyes widened in recognition, then narrowed with something that might have been fear. "Miss Sinclair." He spoke quietly, glancing around. "You should not be here. I need your help." "I know." He stood quickly, taking her arm and guiding her toward a back room. "But not here. Come with me." The back room was a storage area full of old papers and broken equipment. Hastings closed the door behind them and turned to face her. "I thought you were dead," he said. "When you disappeared, I thought Ashford had killed you." He tried. Clara met his eyes steadily. "I survived, and I still have the evidence." Hastings's expression shifted. Hope flickered behind the wariness. "The list. The payments. A copy. The original is hidden somewhere safe." "My God." He ran a hand through his hair. "Do you know what this means? With that list we can destroy him. We can expose everything. That is why I am here." Clara stepped closer. "I need you to publish it. Before the election. Before Ashford can stop us. It is not that simple." Hastings shook his head. "Ashford has people in the newspaper, editors who answer to him. If I try to publish without protection, the story will be killed, and I will be next." "What kind of protection? Legitimacy? Verification?" He began to pace. "If we can get the list authenticated by someone with legal authority, a federal marshal maybe, then it becomes official evidence. Then even Ashford's people cannot suppress it. There is a marshal coming." Clara said it with more confidence than she felt. "Cortez sent word days ago. He should be here soon. Then we wait. We cannot wait." Clara grabbed his arm. "Ashford knows I am alive. He knows I am coming here. Every hour we delay gives him time to prepare. What do you suggest? We do both." She thought quickly, pieces of a plan falling into place. "You start preparing the story. Get it ready to print. Meanwhile, I find the marshal and get the authentication we need. And if the marshal is not here yet, then we publish anyway and deal with the consequences." Hastings stared at her for a long moment. Then he smiled. A genuine smile surprised out of him. "You are not what I expected, Miss Sinclair. What did you expect, a socialite playing at politics? Not a woman willing to burn everything down to get justice." "I am my father's daughter," Clara said, "and my father did not raise a coward." She turned toward the door, then stopped. "One more thing. Where is Ashford now?" "His mansion. On the hill overlooking the city. He has been there since the election campaign began, giving speeches and buying votes. Then that is where this ends." Miss Sinclair Hastings called after her. "Be careful. Ashford has killed before. He will not hesitate to kill again." Clara looked back at him. Her eyes were clear and hard and utterly unafraid. "Neither will the man I am with," she said, "and he is better at it than Ashford ever was." She stepped out into the afternoon light where Boone waited with worry in his eyes and weapons at his hip. "We have a plan," she told him. "But first we need to find a marshal." The territorial marshal's office was 3 blocks east of the newspaper. Clara and Boone approached it together, flanked by 2 of Cortez's men, while the third watched from a rooftop. The building was small but solid, a symbol of federal authority in a territory still learning what law meant. A flag hung from a pole outside, snapping in the winter wind. Inside they found chaos. 3 men in suits were arguing with a harried deputy. Papers were scattered across the floor. Someone had overturned a desk and no one had bothered to write it. "What is happening?" Clara asked. The deputy looked up. His face showed the exhaustion of a man who had been fighting losing battles for too long. "Marshal Whitmore rode out this morning. Emergency in Butte. Some kind of mining dispute that turned violent. When will he be back?" 3 days. Maybe 4. Clara felt her heart sink. 3 days was an eternity. 3 days gave Ashford time to regroup, to counterattack, to destroy everything they had built. Is there anyone else? Another marshal. Someone with authority. The deputy shook his head. Just me. And I do not have the power to authenticate evidence or authorize arrests. Not for something this big. Clara and Boone exchanged looks. The plan was falling apart before it had properly begun. Then we do it anyway, Boone said quietly. What we publish without authentication. We force Ashford's hand, make him respond publicly where everyone can see. That is incredibly risky. Everything is risky. Boone's voice was calm but certain. We have been running and hiding for weeks. It is time to attack. Clara thought about what that meant. The dangers, the possibilities, the near certainty that Ashford would respond with violence. Then she nodded. You are right. We attack. She turned to the deputy. When the marshal returns, tell him Clara Sinclair has evidence that Colonel Victor Ashford has been bribing officials throughout the territory. Tell him the evidence will be published in the Helena Independent, and tell him we could use some backup. The deputy's eyes widened. Ashford. You have proof I have more than proof. I have his own handwriting listing every payment he ever made. She did not wait for his response. She was already walking back toward the newspaper, Boone at her side. They had 12 hours, maybe less. It would have to be enough. The next 6 hours were a blur of activity. At the newspaper office, Hastings worked feverishly setting typewriting copy, preparing a story that would shake the foundations of Montana politics. Clara sat beside him providing details, answering questions, reviewing drafts. The story was damning. Names, dates, amounts. Every corrupt official Ashford had bought, every judge he had compromised, every lawman who had looked the other way while he built his empire of money and violence. And at the center of it all, the deaths. The 3 men who had opposed Ashford and died in accidents that were not accidents. The families destroyed. The justice denied. This will destroy him, Hastings said, looking at the finished pages. If people believe it. They will believe it, Clara said, because it is true. Truth does not always win. Then we make it win. Outside, night had fallen. Boone and Cortez's men maintained a perimeter around the building, watching for threats that everyone knew were coming. The press operators worked by lamplight, their faces grim with the knowledge of what they were risking. It was nearly midnight when the door opened and a boy rushed in, 10 years old, barefoot, breathless with running. Message for Miss Sinclair. He gasped. Clara took the paper from his hand. Read it. Felt her blood turn to ice. We have your father. Come alone to the Silver Creek mine within 2 hours, or he dies. Tell no one, or we kill him immediately. There was no signature. There did not need to be. Ashford had made his move. Clara showed the note to Boone, watched his face harden into something dangerous. It is a trap, he said. I know. You cannot go. If I do not, my father dies. If you do, you both die. Boone gripped her shoulders. Ashford has no intention of letting either of you live. This is execution, not negotiation. Then what do I do? Clara's voice cracked. He is my father, Boone. I cannot just let him die. Boone was silent for a long moment. The muscles in his jaw worked as he fought some internal battle. Then he said, You do not go alone. Would I go with you? We go together. He will kill my father if I am not alone. He will kill your father anyway. Boone's voice was flat, certain. Ashford does not leave witnesses. But if I am there, if I can get to him before he can act, we might have a chance. It is suicide. Maybe. Boone met her eyes. But I told you we face everything together. I meant it. Clara stared at him. This man who had killed her brother, who had saved her life, who had somehow become the person she trusted most in the world. Together, she whispered. Together. They rode out within the hour. Hastings stayed behind to finish the story with orders to publish at dawn, regardless of whether Clara and Boone returned. The Silver Creek mine was 10 miles north of Helena, an abandoned silver operation that had gone bust 5 years earlier, leaving behind tunnels and buildings that had become perfect hiding places for men who wanted to avoid the law. Ashford had chosen well. Remote enough that no one would hear gunshots, complex enough that escape would be nearly impossible. But Boone knew these mountains, had spent 20 years learning every trail, every canyon, every hidden approach that others had forgotten. They did not take the main road. Instead, they circled around, approaching from the west, through terrain so rough that horses had to be led rather than ridden. It took an extra hour, but when they finally saw the mine, they saw something else too. Guards. At least 15 men positioned around the main building and along the obvious approaches, but not along the approach they had taken. "How do we get in?" Clara whispered. "There." Boone pointed toward a collapsed section of hillside. "An old ventilation shaft. It comes up inside the main building. You know this place, I explored it years ago, when I was looking for places to hide." He paused. "I never thought I would use that knowledge like this." They tied the horses and made their way toward the shaft entrance. It was tight, barely wide enough for a man to crawl through, and the darkness inside was absolute. "Stay close," Boone said. "Follow my lead." They entered the mountain. The tunnel seemed endless, claustrophobic. The air was stale and cold, and every sound echoed in ways that made direction impossible to judge. Clara crawled behind Boone, her hands scraping against rough stone, her breath coming in short gasps. She had never been comfortable in enclosed spaces. This was a nightmare made real, but she did not stop, did not hesitate. Her father was somewhere ahead, and she would crawl through hell itself to reach him. After what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes, light appeared ahead. Faint, flickering, the light of lamps burning in the main building. Boone stopped, listened, then began moving again, even more slowly than before. They emerged in a storage room filled with old equipment and collapsed crates. Through a gap in the wall, Clara could see into the main chamber beyond, and there, tied to a chair, was Harrison Sinclair. Her father looked older than she remembered. His face was bruised, one eye swollen shut. His silver hair was matted with blood. But he was alive, breathing, still fighting even now. Around him stood 6 men. Guards with rifles, their attention focused on the main entrance, watching for the arrival they expected. And in the center of them all, seated in a chair, as if holding court, was Colonel Victor Ashford. He was 57 years old, with the bearing of a military man and the cold eyes of a predator. He wore a fine suit, incongruous in the dusty mine, and held a pocket watch in one hand. "Nearly 2 hours," he said to no one in particular. "She should be here soon." "What if she does not come?" one of the guards asked. "She will come." Ashford smiled without warmth. "She is her father's daughter, loyal to a fault. She will walk through that door, and we will end this entire farce. And then we clean up the witnesses." Ashford glanced at Harrison. "Starting with the Honorable Senator Sinclair here." Clara felt Boone's hand on her arm, steadying her, reminding her that rage was not a strategy. How many, he breathed. 6 guards. Ashford. 7 total. I have seen worse odds. Can we stay here? Boone was already moving, checking his weapons. When I start shooting, get to your father. Cut him loose. Get him out through the tunnel. What about you? I will follow. His eyes met hers in the darkness. I promise. Boone. No time. Trust me. Then he was gone, slipping through the shadows like the ghost he had once been, circling around the chamber to a better position. Clara waited. Her heart pounded, her hands shook. Then the first shot rang out. A guard fell, then another. The remaining men scattered, returning fire at shadows, shooting at nothing. Clara ran. She burst from hiding and sprinted toward her father. A guard turned toward her, raising his rifle. She threw herself to the side as the shot went wide, then kept running. Clara Harrison's voice was weak but clear. "Clara, no." She reached him, drew the knife from her belt, cut the ropes that bound his hands. "Can you walk?" "I think so." "Then move." She hauled him upright. He staggered but found his feet. Together they ran toward the storage room, toward the tunnel, toward escape. Behind them the gunfight continued. Bodies fell. Men screamed. And through it all, Boone moved like death itself, appearing and disappearing, striking and vanishing. They reached the tunnel entrance. Clara pushed her father in first. "Go, straight through. Do not stop for anything." "What about—" "Go." Harrison disappeared into the darkness. Clara turned back. She saw Boone across the chamber. 2 guards remained. Ashford had taken cover behind an overturned table. Then she saw something else. A guard she had not noticed emerging from a side-room rifle raised, aimed at Boone's back. Boone. Her scream came too late. The shot rang out. Boone stumbled, fell. No. The word tore from her throat. No. She did not remember drawing the pistol from her belt, did not remember aiming, only remembered the kick of the recoil as she fired. The guard who had shot Boone dropped. She ran to Boone's side. Blood was spreading across his shirt just below his left shoulder. "Go," he gasped. "Get out of here. Not without you. Clara, not without you." She got her arms under his and hauled him upright. He was heavy, so much heavier than he looked, but she did not let go. Together they staggered toward the tunnel. Gunfire cracked behind them. Something hit the wall beside Clara's head, showering her with stone chips. Then they were in the tunnel, in the darkness, crawling and dragging and refusing to stop. Behind them, Ashford's voice echoed through the mine. "Find them! Find them now!" They did not find them. Clara and Boone emerged on the other side of the mountain just as dawn broke over the peaks. Harrison was waiting with the horses, his face gray with exhaustion and fear. "He is hit," Clara said. "We need to stop the bleeding." They did what they could with what they had. The bullet had passed through, cleanly missing anything vital. Boone would survive if they could get him to a doctor. "The newspaper," Clara said. "We need to get back. The story publishes at dawn." "You need to rest," Harrison said. "I can rest when this is over." She mounted her horse and looked down at her father. "Can you ride? I can ride. Then let us end this." They rode for Helena as if the devil himself was chasing them, which in a sense he was. The sun was fully up when they reached the city, and as they rode down the main street, Clara saw something that made her heart soar. People, everywhere, reading newspapers, shouting, arguing. The story had published. Hastings met them at the stable, his face bright with triumph and fear. "It is done," he said. "Every copy sold within the hour. The whole city is talking about it." And Ashford fled. Hastings shook his head. He left his mansion an hour ago with 12 men, heading north toward the border. Clara felt something shift inside her. Not quite relief, not quite victory, something between. "We need to follow him," she said. "We cannot let him escape." Number Boone's voice was weak but firm. He had insisted on riding despite his wound. "You have done enough. Let the law handle it from here." "What law? Ashford owns the law. Not anymore." Hastings pointed toward the marshal's office. "Marshal Whitmore returned this morning. He has been reading the newspaper. He is very interested in speaking with Colonel Ashford." Clara looked at the building, saw men in uniform gathering, saw determination on their faces. It was over, or almost over. Ashford might run, might fight, might try to escape justice, but he would never rule Montana again, never buy another official, never kill another innocent person. They had won. The cost had been terrible. The scars would last forever, but they had won. Clara turned to Boone. He was pale, barely conscious, held upright only by the saddle horn and his own stubbornness. "We did it," she said softly. He managed a smile, the first real smile she had ever seen from him. "You did it," he said. "I just helped." Then he slid from the saddle and collapsed into her arms. The next 3 days passed in a haze of fear and hope. Boone lay in the doctor's house on Main Street, unconscious more often than not, his body fighting to repair what the bullet had torn. Clara rarely left his side. She slept in a chair beside his bed, ate when Maria forced her to, and watched his chest rise and fall with the desperate attention of someone who had already lost too much. Harrison Sinclair stayed, too. The man who had once commanded armies sat quietly in the corner, watching his daughter tend to the man who had killed his son. On the second day he spoke. "You love him." It was not a question. Clara did not pretend otherwise. "Yes, he killed William." "I know." Clara looked at her father, her eyes steady despite the exhaustion. "And I have made my peace with it." "Can you?" Harrison was silent for a long time. Then he said, "William wrote me a letter before he died. He said war makes monsters of us all. He said the only path forward was compassion. I know that letter." Clara's voice was soft. "I have carried those words with me for weeks. Then, perhaps—" Harrison paused. "Perhaps William would want me to carry them too." He stood cross to the bed and looked down at Boone's pale face. "Take care of my daughter, Mr. Thatcher," he said quietly. "That is all the absolution I can offer." Boone's eyes opened, barely, just enough to see the man standing over him. "I will," he whispered, "with everything I have left." On the fourth day, Marshal Whitmore returned with news. Ashford had been caught trying to cross into Canada. His men had abandoned him when the posse closed in. He was in custody now, awaiting trial for bribery, conspiracy, and 3 counts of murder. Justice for once had prevailed. The election happened 2 weeks later. Harrison Sinclair won by the largest margin in Montana's brief history as a state. His first act as senator was to propose legislation against political corruption. His second act was to walk his daughter down the aisle. The wedding was small. A chapel in Helena decorated with winter wildflowers that Jesse Cortez's men had somehow found growing in a sheltered valley. The guests were few but loyal. Cortez himself, Fletcher Hastings, who had already begun writing a book about the whole affair, Maria, who cried throughout the ceremony, and a handful of others who had risked their lives for a cause they believed in. Clara wore a simple white dress, no Boston society gown, no elaborate veil, just clean linen and the ring that had once belonged to Sarah Thatcher, which Boone had offered and Clara had accepted. The ring that had survived 1 marriage, 1 tragedy, and 20 years of grief. The ring that would now begin a new story. When the minister asked if anyone objected, the silence was absolute. When he pronounced them man and wife, Boone kissed Clara with the gentle intensity of a man who had finally found something worth living for. "I do not deserve this," he whispered against her lips. "Probably not," she whispered back. "But you have it anyway." They built a house on the mountain not far from where Boone's cabin had once stood, close enough to visit Sarah and Thomas in the clearing where the wildflowers grew, close enough to remember, far enough to move forward. Years passed. Children came. 2 boys and a girl, all of them with their mother's determination and their father's quiet strength. The territory changed around them, became a state, grew cities and railroads and all the trappings of civilization. But the mountains remained, and so did they. Boone Thatcher died in the spring of 1920 at the age of 83. He passed in his sleep with Clara's hand in his and the sound of grandchildren playing in the yard. Clara followed him 6 months later. She simply closed her eyes one evening and did not open them again. The doctor said her heart had given out. Her family knew better. Her heart had simply gone to find the other half of itself. They were buried together in the clearing where the wildflowers grew beside Sarah and Thomas. 4 graves in a row, 2 families separated by war and united by love resting together beneath the Montana sky. The letter was discovered in a tin box beneath the floorboards of the old cabin in 1962. 73 years after it was written. The granddaughter who found it was named Eleanor Thatcher, and she was the same age Clara had been when she stumbled into Boone's life. Eleanor read the letter by lamplight, her eyes filling with tears she did not bother to wipe away. It told a story that should not have existed, a story of a killer who became a savior, of a virgin bride who chose the most dangerous man in Montana territory, of love born from violence and redemption earned through sacrifice. At the bottom in Clara's careful handwriting were the final words. "If you are reading this, remember one thing. It is never too late to choose differently. It is never too late to forgive. It is never too late to love." We were proof of that. Boone and I. We were proof that even the most broken things can become whole again. Choose grace. Choose mercy. Choose each other. And never stop believing that redemption is possible. With all my love across the years. Clara Sinclair. Thatcher, 1889. Eleanor closed the box, wiped her eyes, looked out the window at the mountains that had witnessed so much. Then she smiled. Some stories she realized were not meant to end. They were meant to continue passed down through generations, reminding us what we were capable of, what we could still become. And so the story lived on, in the mountains, in the wildflowers, in the hearts of everyone who heard it and chose, like Clara, like Boone, to believe that the future could be better than the past, that hope was always possible, that love was always worth the risk.